Turns out, parent profiles and emotion dysregulation in ADHD. Your kid's emotional meltdown isn't just their problem. It's your problem. And if you're the parent, new research suggests you might actually be part of the equation in ways you never thought about. Scientists just discovered that parents fall into 3 distinct personality types when it comes to how they parent and regulate their own emotions, and which type you are could be literally shaping whether your teenager loses it over a bad grade or a ruined sandwich. But here's what gets weird. Parents of kids with ADHD cluster into a specific profile, and it's not the one you'd expect. So what does that actually tell us about where emotion dysregulation comes from? Before we answer that, let's establish what we're dealing with here. Emotion dysregulation is the clinical way of saying your kid can't keep it together. It's not just teenage moodiness. We're talking about explosive anger, crushing anxiety, emotional swings that don't match the situation, an inability to calm down once they're activated. For adolescents with ADHD, this isn't a side effect. This is often the biggest problem they face, and parents have been blamed for this forever. Bad parenting, the narrative goes. Not enough structure, too much coddling. But what if the relationship is way messier than that? What if the parent's own emotional health and parenting style work together in ways that actually predict whether a kid spirals? Scientists wanted to figure out if there were hidden patterns in how parents cluster together. This research comes from heavy hitters across multiple universities. Sarah Pham from Virginia Tech led the charge, working with researchers at Rutgers University and Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. These aren't tiny institutions. These are the people who study ADHD and childhood emotion development at scale. The study was published in June of 2026 in the Journal of Clinical Child and Adolescent Psychology. That's a top-tier journal. These researchers spent years building this work, and what they found is genuinely surprising. They weren't asking whether parents matter. They were asking something more subtle. What patterns of parent traits actually predict which kids will struggle with emotion control? Here's how they did it. 266 adolescents, roughly half of them diagnosed with ADHD and half without. Both groups included kids from similar backgrounds, similar schools, similar overall circumstances. The researchers measured parents on several dimensions. First, the parent's own internalizing symptoms. That's anxiety, depression, worry. The kind of stuff that happens inside your own head. Second, the parent's own emotion dysregulation. How well do they manage their own emotional temperature? Third, parenting style. And not just one dimension of it. They looked at authoritative parenting, the gold standard, which is warm but has clear boundaries. They looked at permissive parenting, which is warm but has basically no boundaries. Think of it like sorting parents into psychological profiles the way a fingerprint reader sorts fingerprints. Each parent has a unique pattern, but maybe those patterns cluster. Maybe you're not just one thing or another. Maybe you're a combination. The results landed in 3 distinct groups, and the numbers tell a story. The first group, 62.5% of the sample, had parents who were doing pretty well. Low internalizing symptoms, good emotion regulation, high authoritative parenting. These are the parents who are anxious about things, sure, but they don't dump that on their kids. They set boundaries. They're warm. They're the control group, basically. The second group, only 10.9%, showed moderate anxiety and emotion dysregulation from the parent, paired with permissive parenting. Picture a parent who's struggling internally but lets their kid do whatever they want anyway because they don't have the bandwidth to enforce rules. Not malicious, just overwhelmed. The third group is where it gets interesting, 26.6%. These parents had high internalizing and high emotion dysregulation themselves, but moderate authoritative parenting. They're anxious, they struggle to calm down, but they're still trying. They're still setting rules, they're still showing up. They're just doing it from a place of internal chaos. Here's what researchers didn't expect. Parents of adolescents with ADHD clustered dramatically differently than parents of kids without ADHD. The ADHD group had way more parents in that third category, the anxious, dysregulated parents who are still trying to be authoritative. This alone is wild, because it could mean something important is happening. Are these parents getting anxious because parenting an ADHD kid is harder? Are their own nervous systems being taxed by constant vigilance? Or were they always anxious, and anxiety plus ADHD in a kid is just a catastrophic combination? The study can't answer that, but it points a finger at something real. And the emotionally dysregulated kids, the ones who blow up and can't come back down, they clustered with parents in groups 2 and 3, not group 1. So what does this actually mean for you if you're a parent right now? First, the obvious thing, if you're struggling emotionally, your teenager probably notices. Not because you're bad, because they're picking it up like a radio signal. Kids are emotional sponges. Second, this research is basically saying that the combination of parental anxiety plus parenting style is what matters. You can be anxious and still do okay if you're maintaining boundaries and warmth. You can be calm and wreck everything if you're letting your kid run the house. It's the interaction, it's the pattern. But here's the limitation. This is correlational. We don't actually know what causes what. Maybe anxious parents have anxious kids because genetics. Maybe they model dysregulation because they're dysregulated. Maybe parenting an anxious kid makes the parent more anxious. All three are possible. And this study was mostly white, mostly suburban. The patterns might look completely different in different communities with different stressors. What's interesting is that this challenges the narrative that ADHD is just a neurological disorder that happens to kids independently of their environment. Maybe it's not that simple. Maybe what we call emotion dysregulation in adolescents with ADHD isn't purely neurological. Maybe it's the collision between a brain that struggles to regulate attention and an environment where the people who are supposed to help that brain regulate its emotions are themselves struggling. That's not blaming parents. That's saying the system is harder than we thought. The system involves loops. Parent stress increases. Kid senses it. Kid gets more dysregulated. Parent gets more stressed. That's not one person's fault. That's a feedback loop. And if that's true, interventions might need to target both. Not just the kid's brain. Not just the parent's parenting style. Both at once. The biggest takeaway here might be that emotion dysregulation in adolescence might not live in the kid alone. It lives in the space between the kid and the parent's own emotional world. One simple fact: more than a quarter of parents raising teenagers with ADHD are themselves struggling with significant anxiety and emotion regulation issues while trying to hold boundaries. That's hard. Maybe it's the hardest thing. So what if we stopped assuming that a dysregulated teenager is a parenting failure and started asking, what's happening in this family's nervous system? Turns out, scientists have been busy, and they're not done yet.